path pathway, and he is on level 4. What is a Buybox? Jeff Dunlap.
Thank you very much. So last time I gave a speech, I asked somebody to record it, and I also asked somebody to record this speech. So if you're timer shy and don't want to be in the recording, now it's time to bow out. How many of you have rented an apartment or bought a house? We know it's a very emotional decision when you go shopping for a house. You've got to count the number of bedrooms, care about the bathroom. Does it have a living room? Is there a garage? Is there a dining room? All of these things are very important when we're talking about buying our home. As a real estate investor, I have different sets of criteria that I work with, and that is how I define my buy box. So my buy box is multifamily investment properties in York. That's my current buy box. I've had different buy boxes in the past, and we'll talk about some of those. If you look at the screen, you can see right now, my selection criteria is on my daily path. When I used to live in Lancaster and worked in York, I wanted to make sure that my investment properties were on that daily path, so I didn't have to go way out of my way somewhere to unplug a toilet or unlock a door for somebody, or there's always something tendency. Because we focus on multifamily, we wanted 4 or more units, and we wanted them to perform at an 8 to 15% annual return on our investment. So that's my selection criteria for my buy box. Several years ago, when we were shopping, I evaluated this list of properties to try and figure out which ones I thought were the best deal for us. There's about 20 properties there, and I probably evaluated those over 2 or 3 months looking at different properties. The story is, if you spend 90 days doing something or evaluate 20 deals, you'll become good enough that you can determine if the deal is a good deal, a better deal, or a great deal. And so if you look at this list, at the very top of the list is an annual return on investment. I think it's about the second column of negative 23%. That doesn't fit my 10 to 15%, right? But if you go down to the bottom of the list, this property that's called Foz is the property that we actually bought, and you can see that it's at a 10% annual return on investment. So by sorting that list by return on investment, after I input the relevant details, which we'll get to, I'm going to show you how we do this in a minute. I could pick what I felt was a great deal or the best deal on the current market at that time. If we look at the next slide, here is that specific property at the time that we bought it. I believe it was 2018. You can see at the top of the list, we have the monthly rent for each of the 4 units that we were acquiring in one building. And then the next section shows the expenses, annual and monthly, which include property taxes, water, sewer, insurance, maintenance. And then at the bottom, you can see information about the mortgages that we acquired and how much the mortgage payment was and our cash down payment. And then at the very bottom, you can see the estimated value of the property at an 8% cap rate. And you can see what the cap rate is at $150,000, which I think we actually ended up buying for $152,000. Not that it makes much difference. We got into a bidding war for this property because somebody else thought it was a great deal too. Just a quick definition, the cap rate is sort of like the interest rate. It's not really, but to help you understand, if I put $400 in a savings account and I got 5% interest back, that would be, I can't do quick math. I put 10% back, I'd get $40,000 a year, right? So the cap rate kind of represents if I did $150,000 investment and I got back the net operating income of $12,000 a year, that's about 8%. So it's sort of like interest. So that's a specific example from history in our real estate investment journey. Now, if we go and look at today's current marketplace, I registered with a local real estate agent, and she put me into the multi-list email feature. And every day I get an email that shows me a list of properties that are for sale. And this is a list. The list is, I believe, 17 properties long. This is just the first 5 arranged chronically. And you can take a look at that. We picked the first property, which is this one here on King Street in East Berlin. And we are going to go through that and evaluate that. So the first thing we do is we look on that multi-list sheet, and you can see here are the current rents listed. So I filled out the annual property sheet with the rents, and we have a vacancy factor of 5% because it's not safe to assume that it's always going to be rented. Then we go to a data income forecast. Because I'm a little familiar with the market, I believe those properties are underpriced in the marketplace. So these are the prices that I believe that we could get with those based on the HUD fair market value. You can see here's the fair market rent and here's the current rent. Then we go through and we put in our data expenses. We have school taxes, we have some sewer and rent, water probably. The listing says that the tenants pay for all the utilities, but they don't. It's not always necessarily true, so I'm not trusting that. I put a couple numbers in here until I can verify that. Then I put in the mortgage information to see what the mortgage is, and then the estimated payment. This is a question and answer session, so I actually have 10 minutes to talk and then 10 minutes for Q&A. So this is the mortgage amount here. If we were to buy this property with $100,000 down, this would be the mortgage payment. Then this would be the monthly cash flow of about $1,400 or $16,000 a year. We compare that and we can determine the estimated cap rate and what the actual cap rate is. And that looks to me like it's a pretty good deal. I would, if I was actively in acquisition mode, I would go and look at that property and make sure that all my numbers work and everything fits. And I want to move forward with it. So the questions are, is it a good or great, better deal? Is there a way that I can add value to it to improve property and raise the rents? 90 days to evaluate the market, looking at 20 to 40 deals, evaluating them for price, income, and expense. And then mortgage qualification, interest, length, payment, and balloon. Does anybody have any questions that I can answer related to buying real estate? Roland.
I know we've seen multiple presentations from you. I'm just curious, what got you into it? What was your motivation to start very first time?
So that's a really interesting question. I think I've told the story before. My father started in real estate investing when I was about 4 or 5. And the first property that he bought, he remodeled the basement into 2 more apartments. And I remember going with him on a Saturday morning and hammering nails into the floor and dumping paint all over the place and helping him with his apartments. So I have a long history of my father working in real estate and doing real estate. So I have experience from that time period of what it is to deal with tenants, dealing with bathroom clogs, painting new units, putting down new carpet, and different aspects of property rental management. Pambo.
What was your best purchase and what was the return that you got from that purchase?
I do not actually have that number. I'm not probably as detail oriented in that area as I should be, because I kind of just keep investing and keep counting on it to long term work out the best. Because we've had the Foz property that I showed you at the beginning of the list, the longest, and that one's had the most appreciation and the most rental increase over time. I would say that's currently our best performing property at our best value. If I go back to showing you those rents, when I bought it, you can see here the rents were $550 to $650, and we just rented that unit number 4. If you remember my speech a month ago, we just rented that unit number 4 for $1,100. So because it's an investment property, the value of the property is strictly determined by the income and the expenses. So that increases the value of that property from 150,000 to probably closer to 240, 280,000 in the 6 years that we've owned it. So that I would pick as my best performing property.
Dave has a question.
David. Yes. So I once had a very short-term house that was moving out and rented it for a little bit. But what is your backup plan when your tenant does damage and doesn't pay the rent and you end up in small claims court? Trying to get your rent back and your damage is taken care of.
Yeah, that's a challenge for every landlord, every property owner. If you look at the property data sheet that's in front of you right now, you can see at the bottom there, I have 5% for maintenance and 5% for reserve. So those are the numbers, that money gets put aside and gets put back for those types of damages and repairs. As an example, this Foz property that I'm talking about right now needs a new roof. And I've gotten quotes for a new roof. It's about $10,000. So that $10,000 will come out of that reserve and maintenance. The more important part is tenant selection. You want to make sure you pick tenants that have good credit scores. You want to make sure you pick tenants that have good jobs. We typically look for a tenant that has 3 to 5 times the monthly income as the rent, so that typically we don't have to worry as much about them defaulting on the rent. We have had in our probably 25 years of real estate experience, we've evicted, I believe, 6 or 7 tenants, and we've lost, our worst loss was about $3,000. And it's my own fault. It was a single mother who was struggling with her finances, and we left her go a little bit longer than we should have. So my wife and I have a strong feeling that part of the reason we do this is to help support other people and to help other people. So we willingly kind of took that $3,000 hit because we were interested in providing her with a safe home and providing her with a place for her and her children. But eventually we reach our limit, and then that's when the eviction process starts. Good question, David. Thank you. Rohan.
What's the craziest tenant story you have?
Oh my word. They're just, they don't stop. But I'll tell you about Frank. We inherited a tenant whose name was Frank. He lived in the apartment I believe, 25 years before we bought the building. I don't believe he ever had a girlfriend or a wife, and he just lived up in his little apartment. It was in pretty bad shape at the time we bought it, but he was happily paying rent, so we kind of left it there as long as we could. We got a new tenant in the second floor apartment below him, and she said, "Can you cover that skylight? I feel like somebody's looking in at me and watching me." And so we put a fluorescent shield over that window so that nobody could look in and see. We thought it was taken care of. So eventually she moved out because Frank harassed her a lot. She was a young single woman and they just didn't get along at all. She made too much noise. Her kids made too much noise. He was unhappy about it. So she moved out. She took really great care of the apartment. There's just lots of stories to go with her. Anyway, we rented to a new tenant. The new tenant moved in, and the first day she was there, he came down knocking on her door and tried to get in through, push his way in through the door and said, "You have to tell the landlord to remove that screen over the sunroof because I use that to keep track of who's coming and going in your apartment." Guess who got an eviction notice? So Frank is no longer with our property. So long, Frank. Next question, please. Any other questions? I don't know.
I got a question.
Go for it, Dan.
How many properties do you currently manage outside of your house?
We currently have, my brother and I have 8 units in Lancaster, and my wife and I have 16 units in York. So about 24 units.
And a follow-up question to that. How long ago did you start investing in rental properties?
Our first property was what would be called a house hack, although in the early 80s, when we acquired that property, they didn't use that term. We were just buying a duplex. We rented the first floor out to somebody and we lived on the second floor. So that would have been our first investment property in like the 84. And then we had that one until the early 2000s. I guess we sold it in like 2005. And we were kind of out of it for a while. And then we got back into property renting with this Foz property in 2018.
That many properties sounds more like a full-time job.
It could very well be a full-time job. I have handymen and contractors that I pay very well to do a lot of work to maintain those for me because it's not my full-time job. This is my full-time job, Johnson Controls. So.
I mean, even having upkeep and grass cutting and all the things that are necessary for all those things.
Well, one of the things that we target in our selection process is no yards. So we have one property that has a yard that we pay a landscape guy to come and cut it. All the rest of them, the tenants either take care of the property grass and snow removal, or there is no grass. But yes, all of those things impact my spare time. It looks like I'm running out of time, so thank you everybody for humoring me.
Thank you, Tim. Real estate has always been a black box that's flummoxed me. I've never understood how people put money into it and get returns out of it.